My sister-in-law spent years telling my wife she wasn't built for motherhood and made her cry at every family gathering with comments about our failed IVF attempts. When I finally kicked her out of our house for saying my wife should be grateful she gets to sleep in, she started calling my wife's boss with anonymous complaints and showing up at her coffee shop to loudly discuss women who fake fertility problems for attention. Then we found out she was wearing a fake pregnancy belly while secretly going to fertility clinics herself, and her obsession took an even darker turn. My SIL spent years mocking my wife's infertility and said that she is not built to be a mother. I finally snapped. I have been married to my wife Hannah for 7 years. We've been trying to have a baby for almost 5 of those. We've done everything. Tests, IVF, specialists, the works. It's been emotionally and physically draining, especially for Hannah, but she stayed strong. After our second failed round of IVF last year, we decided to take a break and focus on healing. Enter my brother Jake and his wife Nicole. They have 3 kids under 6, and I'll be blunt. Nicole is the kind of person who thinks motherhood is a personality. She's always talking about how real women are defined by the sacrifices they make for their children. She also has this nasty, smug habit of making backhanded comments when we're around. Example, at Thanksgiving, she loudly said, "I'm just so thankful I didn't have to spend tens of thousands to get pregnant. Some people have to force nature and still fail." My wife went silent. I saw her blink a few times and excuse herself. Nicole acted like she hadn't said anything wrong. Then, at a birthday party in the spring, she told Hannah, "You wouldn't understand how exhausting it is until you've actually, been pregnant." I told her to cut it out. She just said, "Relax. I'm just saying not everyone's cut out for motherhood." Jake usually just shrugs when I bring this up, saying Nicole doesn't mean it that way, or that she has no filter. My parents have noticed it too, but no one wants to rock the boat. Last weekend, we hosted a small barbecue for my dad's birthday. My parents, Jake and Nicole, and a few friends were there. Everything was going fine until Nicole started talking, again, about how chaotic life with toddlers is. Hannah smiled politely, but I could tell she was retreating emotionally, like she always does when Nicole starts. Then Nicole looked directly at Hannah and said, "You're so lucky you get to sleep in. I haven't slept past 6 a.m. in years. I guess some women just aren't built for motherhood, huh?" You could hear a fork drop. Hannah just stared at her, then quietly got up and went inside. I saw red. I stood up and said, "Nicole, get out." She blinked like she thought I was joking. I repeated, "Get outside. You don't get to humiliate my wife in our home." She scoffed. I didn't say anything wrong. I told her she'd been cruel to Hannah for years and that she was no longer welcome in our house. Jake stood up and started to argue, but I cut him off and said if he wanted to support that, he could leave too. My parents tried to de-escalate, but I wasn't hearing it. Nicole stormed off, dragging Jake behind her. Hannah came out of the bedroom shortly after, eyes red, and asked if she'd made things awkward. I told her what happened, and she just started crying again, this time from relief. Later that night, Jake sent me a long message saying I overreacted, that Nicole was just venting, and that I humiliated them in front of the whole family. My mom says she gets why I'm angry, but wishes I hadn't done it in front of everyone. My dad, for the record, said it was overdue. Nicole, of course, hasn't apologized. Instead, she made a vague Facebook post about how some people can't handle strong mothers, and it shows. Here's the twist. This morning, my wife told me she took a pregnancy test on a whim. Her blood test confirmed it. We decided to share the pregnancy news quietly with just my parents first, then planned to tell others gradually when we felt ready. But somehow, Nicole found out. That evening, Hannah got a text from an unknown number. "Enjoy it while it lasts. Some people aren't meant to be mothers." The next day, we got a call from Hannah's employer. The person on the other end said they'd received a complaint about Hannah's unprofessional behavior and hostile work environment. My hands shook as I listened to the HR representative explain that someone had called claiming to be a concerned coworker who witnessed Hannah making discriminatory comments about mothers in the workplace. Hannah grabbed the phone from me, her face pale. She spent the next 20 minutes explaining that she'd never said anything like that she worked well with all her colleagues, including those with children. The HR person said they'd investigate, but that Hannah should be prepared for a formal meeting. After she hung up, Hannah sank into the couch. I sat beside her, watching her hands protectively cover her stomach. The timing wasn't coincidental. Nicole had somehow found out about the pregnancy and was already trying to destroy us. I called Jake immediately. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding irritated. I told him about the text and the workplace complaint. He went quiet for a moment, then said Nicole had been with him all evening. I asked how Nicole knew about the pregnancy. He claimed he had no idea what I was talking about. The next morning, my mother called. She was crying. Nicole had called her the night before, sobbing about how I'd humiliated her and how she was just trying to help Hannah by sharing her experiences. She'd convinced my mother that I'd overreacted and that Hannah was being oversensitive. My mother suggested we all sit down together to work things out. I drove to my parents' house that afternoon. My father was in the garage, and he looked up when I walked in. He didn't say anything at first, just handed me a wrench and pointed to the car he was working on. We worked in silence for a few minutes before he spoke. He told me Nicole had been calling family members all morning, She'd told my aunt that Hannah had been spreading lies about her. She'd told my cousin that I'd threatened her at the barbecue. Each story was slightly different, but they all painted us as the aggressors. Back home, Hannah was on her laptop, her jaw clenched. She showed me her social media. Nicole had made another post, this time about toxic people who can't handle truth, and how some women use their struggles to manipulate others. Several of Jake and Nicole's friends had commented with support. One even mentioned how brave Nicole was for speaking up about fake victims. That evening, we sat at our kitchen table making a list. Every incident, every comment, every slight over the years. Hannah remembered things I'd forgotten, like the time Nicole had given her a book about accepting a child-free life for Christmas, or when she'd loudly discussed Hannah's barren womb at a family dinner, claiming it was just medical terminology. The next day brought more chaos. Hannah's best friend called to say she'd received a Facebook message from someone claiming to be concerned about Hannah's mental health. The message said Hannah had been acting erratically and making threats against pregnant women. Her friend recognized Nicole's writing style immediately. I went to Jake's house that afternoon. Nicole's car was in the driveway, but Jake answered the door alone. He looked tired. I showed him screenshots of everything, the posts, the complaint to Hannah's work, the messages to family members. He kept shaking his head, saying Nicole would never do that. Then Nicole appeared in the doorway behind him. She was smiling, that same smug smile from the barbecue. She asked if I'd come to apologize. I told her I knew what she was doing. She tilted her head, playing innocent, and said she had no idea what I meant. Jake stepped between us, telling me to leave. As I walked back to my car, Nicole called out that she hoped Hannah was taking her prenatal vitamins, that stress wasn't good for pregnancies, especially fragile ones. That night, Hannah woke up with cramping. We rushed to the emergency room, terrified. The doctor assured us everything was fine, that some cramping was normal, but that Hannah's blood pressure was elevated. She needed to reduce stress. Hannah laughed bitterly at that advice. The next morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. It was my mother, hysterical. Nicole had called her the night before, claiming she'd seen Hannah drinking wine at a restaurant. My mother wanted to know if Hannah was still pregnant. I had to explain that Hannah hadn't left the house except for the hospital visit. Throughout the day, more calls came in. My uncle had heard Hannah was having an affair. My grandmother had been told I'd stolen money from Jake. Each lie was more outrageous than the last, but Nicole was smart. She mixed truth with fiction, making her stories just believable enough. Hannah's work situation escalated. The HR investigation had expanded. Now they were interviewing her colleagues, disrupting her entire department. Her supervisor, who'd always been supportive, seemed distant. Hannah came home early that day, exhausted and defeated. I found Hannah in the nursery we'd started planning years ago. She was sitting on the floor, holding a tiny onesie we'd bought after our first positive pregnancy test. She looked up at me with red eyes and asked if maybe we should just move away, start fresh somewhere Nicole couldn't reach us. That's when something shifted in me. We weren't running. Nicole had spent years tormenting my wife, and now she was trying to destroy the happiness we'd fought so hard to achieve. I pulled Hannah close and promised her we'd get through this. The next day, I started documenting everything properly. I created a folder with screenshots, dates, times, and witness names. I reached out to people who'd been at various family events, asking if they remembered specific incidents. Most did. My aunt admitted she'd always been uncomfortable with Nicole's comments, but hadn't wanted to interfere. Meanwhile, Nicole's campaign continued. She showed up at Hannah's favorite coffee shop, sitting at the next table with her kids, talking loudly on the phone about how some women pretend to be victims for attention. Hannah left without ordering. Then came the package. It arrived at our door with no return address. Inside was a book about miscarriage, and a note that said, "For when you need it, a friend who knows." Hannah's hands trembled as she dropped it in the trash. I called Jake again, but he didn't answer. My father told me Jake had been staying with them some nights. Apparently, he and Nicole had been fighting. My mother still insisted this was all a misunderstanding that could be resolved with communication. The investigation at Hannah's work intensified. They'd received multiple complaints now, all anonymous, all with slightly different accusations. Her colleague mentioned seeing a woman who looked like Nicole in the parking lot the day the first complaint was filed. Hannah's doctor prescribed medication for her blood pressure. She was only 8 weeks pregnant, and already the stress was taking a physical toll. I watched her take her pills each morning, her face drawn with exhaustion. One evening, Hannah's phone buzzed with another unknown number. This time it was a link to a mommy blog post about women who shouldn't reproduce. The post, published that day under a fake name, described a woman who sounded exactly like Hannah, painting her as unstable and unfit. I'd had enough. I called a family meeting at my parents' house, insisting everyone attend. Jake showed up without Nicole, saying she wasn't feeling well. I laid out everything, the timeline, the evidence, the escalating harassment. My mother's face went pale as she realized the extent of it. Jake kept defending Nicole, saying we were paranoid, that we were seeing connections that weren't there. Then my cousin spoke up. She'd received a call from Nicole asking for Hannah's work number, claiming she wanted to send flowers to apologize. That was 2 days before the first complaint. The room went quiet. Jake's face changed as more family members shared their experiences. My aunt mentioned Nicole asking detailed questions about Hannah's schedule. My uncle recalled Nicole pumping him for information about our finances. Still, Jake insisted there had to be an explanation. He left, promising to talk to Nicole. The rest of us sat in stunned silence. My father finally spoke, saying he'd been documenting things too. He'd noticed patterns in Nicole's behavior going back years. That night, Hannah and I lay in bed, both unable to sleep. She whispered that she was scared, not just for herself, but for our baby. The stress was consuming her. I held her close, feeling her tears on my chest, and promised we'd protect our family. The next morning brought a new crisis. Hannah's car had been keyed overnight. The security camera showed a figure in a hoodie, but the face wasn't visible. The height and build could have been Nicole, but we couldn't prove it. As we waited for the police to arrive, Hannah's phone rang. It was her boss. The HR investigation was becoming a distraction. While they hadn't found any evidence supporting the complaints, the sheer volume of them was concerning. They suggested Hannah take some personal time while they sorted things out. Hannah hung up and walked to the bathroom. I heard her crying through the door. When she came out, her eyes were dry but determined. She said she wasn't going to let Nicole win. Our baby deserved better than a mother who gave up. That afternoon, we met with Hannah's colleague who'd seen Nicole in the parking lot. She was nervous, but agreed to speak with HR. She'd recognized Nicole from social media and thought it strange she was there, but hadn't connected it to the complaints until now. Progress felt slow, but we were building our case. Every piece of evidence mattered. Every witness account added credibility. Nicole had been careful, but she'd also been arrogant. She'd left traces, assuming we'd never fight back. Then Jake called. His voice was different, subdued. He asked to meet me alone. I met Jake at a small diner halfway between our houses. He slumped into the booth across from me, looking older than his 34 years. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually neat appearance was disheveled. He ordered coffee with shaking hands. For several minutes, we sat in uncomfortable silence. I watched him stir sugar into his cup, avoiding eye contact. Finally, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, sliding it across the table. Inside were printed emails between Nicole and someone named Victoria. My stomach dropped as I read them. Nicole had been planning this for months, long before the barbecue incident. The emails detailed her growing resentment toward Hannah, her belief that we didn't deserve a baby when she'd had 3 so easily. One message particularly stood out where Nicole wrote about teaching us what real struggle meant. Jake's hands covered his face as I read. When I finished, he explained that he'd found Nicole's laptop open while she was showering. Something about her recent behavior had bothered him enough to look. He'd discovered multiple email accounts, fake social media profiles, and a detailed calendar tracking Hannah's work schedule and our appointments. The revelation should have felt like vindication, but watching my brother crumble across from me brought no satisfaction. He admitted Nicole had become obsessed after our first IVF attempt. She'd started making comments about divine intervention and natural selection. He'd dismissed it as postpartum mood swings after their 3rd child. I asked what he planned to do. He shook his head, lost. They had 3 young children. He loved his wife but couldn't reconcile this version with the woman he'd married. I suggested counseling, but he laughed bitterly. Nicole didn't believe in therapy. She thought it was for weak people who couldn't handle reality. We parted ways with Jake, promising to confront Nicole that evening. I drove home with mixed emotions, relieved to have proof, but worried about my brother's family falling apart. Hannah was napping when I arrived, her face peaceful for the first time in days. I decided not to wake her with this development yet. That evening, our doorbell rang repeatedly. Through the peephole, I saw Nicole standing there, her face contorted with rage. I didn't open the door. She pounded harder, shouting accusations about turning Jake against her. Neighbors began peering out their windows. I called Jake, but he didn't answer. Nicole eventually left, but not before leaving a note under our doormat. It was a printout of an article about stress-induced miscarriages with certain passages highlighted. My hands clenched as I tore it into pieces. This had escalated beyond mere cruelty into something genuinely disturbing. Hannah woke to find me pacing the living room. I showed her Jake's evidence and explained his visit. She processed it quietly, then asked about the children. That was Hannah, always thinking of others even while under attack. We both worried what this meant for our nephews and niece. The next morning, Hannah's supervisor called. The HR investigation had taken an unexpected turn. They'd discovered the IP addresses of the anonymous complaints traced back to various coffee shops and libraries around town. None matched any employee devices or locations. They were dropping the investigation and apologizing for the disruption. Relief washed over Hannah's face, but it was short-lived. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number containing a photo of our house taken that morning. The message read that this wasn't over. We immediately checked our security cameras and found footage of a figure in dark clothing, photographing our home from across the street. I took the morning off work to install additional security cameras and change our locks. The hardware store clerk must have sensed my urgency because he helped me find everything quickly. While I worked on the installations, Hannah called her doctor to discuss the stress levels and any risks to the pregnancy. My mother arrived unannounced that afternoon, her face drawn with worry. Jake had shown up at their house the previous night with the children, asking if they could stay for a few days. He'd told them about discovering Nicole's schemes. My father was furious, but my mother seemed more concerned about keeping the family together. She pleaded with us to consider mediation, to think about the children. Hannah listened patiently, before explaining that Nicole had crossed too many lines. This wasn't about family harmony anymore. It was about protecting ourselves and our unborn child. My mother left disappointed but understanding. That evening, we received a call from Hannah's colleague, Ben. He'd overheard Nicole at the grocery store talking on her phone about pregnancy complications and how some women's bodies rejected babies for good reasons. He'd recognized her from social media and thought we should know. The casual cruelty of discussing our situation with strangers made my blood boil. Jake texted later that night. Nicole had admitted to some of the harassment, but claimed we'd driven her to it by flaunting our fertility struggles. She felt we were seeking attention and sympathy while she struggled thanklessly with 3 children. Her twisted logic made no sense, but Jake seemed caught between loyalty to his wife and recognition of her wrongdoing. The stress was affecting Hannah's sleep. She'd wake multiple times each night, checking her phone for new messages or ensuring doors were locked. Her doctor prescribed mild sleep aids safe for pregnancy, but Hannah worried about taking anything that might affect the baby. Dark circles appeared under her eyes, and she'd lost weight, despite being in her first trimester. I started working from home more often, not wanting to leave Hannah alone. My boss was understanding when I explained we were dealing with family harassment. I set up my laptop in the living room where I could see both the front door and Hannah resting on the couch. One morning, Hannah discovered her car tires had been deflated overnight. Not slashed, just deflated, as if someone wanted to inconvenience us without causing permanent damage. The security cameras showed a figure approaching our driveway around 3 a.m., but they'd avoided the camera angles, suggesting familiarity with our setup. We filed a police report, but without clear evidence linking Nicole to the incidents, they could only document our complaints. The officer suggested we keep detailed records of everything and consider a restraining order if we could establish a pattern. The legal route felt overwhelming when we just wanted peace. Hannah's best friend, Jamie, offered to stay with us for a few days. She worked remotely and could keep Hannah company while I handled necessary errands. Her presence helped Hannah relax slightly, and they spent hours talking about anything except our current situation. During this time, Nicole's social media activity increased dramatically. She posted constantly about motherhood, sacrifice, and people who didn't appreciate real struggles. Each post felt like a veiled attack on us, but they were vague enough to maintain plausible deniability. Her friends rallied around her, offering support for whatever unnamed hardship she was facing. Jake called one evening, hammered and emotional. He'd moved back home, but things were tense. Nicole had agreed to couples counseling but spent their first session painting herself as a victim of our jealousy. The therapist had suggested individual sessions, which Nicole refused. Jake felt trapped between his marriage and his family. I reminded him about the emails he'd found, the evidence of premeditation. He admitted he'd confronted Nicole about them, but she'd claimed they were just venting to a friend, taken out of context. She'd cried, apologized for letting her frustrations get the better of her, and promised to leave us alone. Jake wanted to believe her. 2 days later, Hannah received a package at work. Inside was a baby outfit with a note, "For your miracle baby. Hope it fits for the funeral." Her colleagues were horrified. Security footage showed a woman dropping off the package, claiming to be a friend surprising Hannah. The description matched Nicole, but the woman had worn sunglasses and a hat. Hannah's supervisor suggested she work from home for her safety and peace of mind. The transition was smooth, but it meant another victory for Nicole in isolating us. Hannah set up her workspace in our spare bedroom, trying to maintain normalcy while our world tilted off axis. My aunt called that weekend. She'd been at a family gathering where Nicole had spent an hour discussing our attention-seeking behavior and how we'd turned Jake against her. Several relatives who hadn't heard our side of the story were beginning to believe Nicole's version of events. The family divide was widening. We decided to send a detailed email to extended family, laying out the timeline of events with evidence. It felt desperate, but Nicole's campaign of misinformation was gaining traction. Some relatives responded with shock and support, others remained silent. A few accused us of airing private matters unnecessarily. Hannah's 12-week appointment arrived with mixed emotions. The ultrasound showed a healthy baby, growing normally despite the stress. We cried seeing the heartbeat, a moment of joy in the chaos. The doctor noted Hannah's blood pressure remained elevated and stressed the importance of reducing anxiety. On the drive home, we discussed our options seriously. Moving away felt like admitting defeat, but staying meant continued harassment. Hannah's job allowed remote work, and I could potentially transfer to another office. The idea of starting fresh somewhere Nicole couldn't reach us grew more appealing. That night, we were awakened by our security alarm. Motion sensors had detected someone in our backyard. I grabbed a flashlight and baseball bat while Hannah called 911. By the time I got outside, whoever it was had fled. Police found footprints leading to our back gate and marks on our window screens as if someone had been testing them. The officers increased patrols in our neighborhood, but couldn't do much else without catching someone in the act. We spent the rest of the night wide awake, jumping at every sound. Hannah clutched her stomach protectively, whispering apologies to our baby for bringing it into such chaos. Morning brought another surprise. Our mailbox was stuffed with printed screenshots of Hannah's old social media posts, dating back years. Someone had gone through her entire online history, highlighting any post about wanting children or fertility struggles. Notes in the margins mocked her desperation and suggested she was mentally unfit for motherhood. I took photos of everything before disposing of them. Our evidence folder was growing thicker, but it felt like playing defense in a game where Nicole kept changing the rules. Every time we adapted to one form of harassment, she found another avenue of attack. Hannah made the difficult decision to deactivate all her social media accounts. It meant losing touch with distant friends and family, but the platforms had become weapons against us. I followed suit, removing any avenue Nicole could use to monitor or contact us digitally. Jake showed up that afternoon without warning. He looked exhausted, explaining that Nicole had been manic since their counseling session. She'd accused him of betraying her by sharing her private emails with me. Their home had become a battlefield, with the children caught in the middle. He asked if he could store some important documents with us, fearing Nicole might destroy them in anger. We agreed, though it felt like being pulled deeper into their marital problems. Jake brought a box containing birth certificates, passports, and financial documents. He also included a journal Nicole had kept, which he'd discovered hidden in their garage. He hadn't read it, but thought it might be relevant. After Jake left, curiosity got the better of us. The journal dated back 2 years and revealed Nicole's growing obsession with comparing herself to others, particularly Hannah. Entry after entry detailed her resentment that Hannah received sympathy for infertility while she got no recognition for her fertility. The logic was twisted, but it provided insight into her mindset. One entry particularly stood out, written after our first failed IVF. They spent $30,000 trying to force nature. That money could have fed families in need. Instead, they selfishly pursue what God clearly doesn't intend for them. Someone should teach them that not everyone deserves everything they want. The journal confirmed what we'd suspected. Nicole's harassment wasn't spontaneous but calculated. She'd been planning various ways to humble us for over a year. Some ideas she'd written were even more disturbing than what she'd actually done, including suggestions about contaminating our food or arranging accidents. We made copies of the most relevant pages and returned the journal to Jake's document box. The evidence was overwhelming, but it also painted a picture of someone deeply unwell. Hannah suggested we push harder for Nicole to get professional help, if not for her sake, then for the children's. That weekend, my parents hosted Sunday dinner, hoping to bring the family together. We reluctantly attended, wanting to maintain relationships with other family members. Nicole and Jake arrived separately, the tension between them palpable. Nicole avoided us entirely, focusing on playing the devoted mother to her children. During dinner, Nicole made several passive-aggressive comments about people who couldn't handle honest feedback and how society had become too sensitive. Everyone knew she was referring to us, but no one wanted to engage. The children sensed the tension, with their oldest asking why everyone seemed mad. As we prepared to leave, Nicole cornered Hannah in the hallway. I found them with Nicole standing too close, whispering something that had drained the color from Hannah's face. When Nicole saw me, she stepped back with a smile, saying she was just offering pregnancy advice. Hannah rushed past me to the car. In the car, Hannah revealed that Nicole had whispered statistics about miscarriage rates, especially for women with previous fertility issues. She'd ended by saying stress was the #1 cause, and that Hannah should think about whether bringing a child into such a hostile family environment was selfish. I turned the car around, intending to confront Nicole, but Hannah begged me not to. She reminded me that Nicole wanted a reaction, wanted us to look like the aggressors. Instead, we drove home in silence, both processing the escalation from harassment to direct threats against our unborn child. That night, we made a decision. We would start looking for jobs in other cities, far enough away that casual visits would be impossible. It wasn't the victory we wanted, but protecting our family had to come first. We began updating resumes and researching areas with good schools and hospitals. The decision brought some peace, giving us a goal beyond just surviving each day. We told only my father, who understood completely. He offered to help with moving expenses when the time came and promised to visit regardless of where we ended up. His support meant everything. Meanwhile, the harassment continued, but felt less overwhelming knowing it had an expiration date. When we found another package on our doorstep, this time containing a book about stillbirths, we simply added it to our evidence file. When Hannah received anonymous emails about infant mortality, we forwarded them to a new folder without reading the details. Jake texted updates occasionally. Nicole had refused further counseling, insisting their problems stemmed from our persecution of her. She'd started telling the children that Aunt Hannah and Uncle were mean people who didn't like Mommy. The poisoning of those relationships hurt more than anything else. One morning, we woke to find our front yard decorated with baby items, used bottles, torn diapers, and broken toys scattered across the lawn. A sign stuck in the grass read, "Practice for your future failures." Neighbors stared as we cleaned up, some offering help, others just watching the drama unfold. The incident prompted our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, to approach us. She'd installed her own security system recently and had captured clear footage of Nicole placing the items around 4 a.m. Finally, we had undeniable proof. Mrs. Chen offered to provide the footage to police and testify if needed. We filed another report, this time with video evidence. The officer said it was enough for a harassment charge, but we'd need to decide if we wanted to pursue it. Pressing charges would mean court appearances, lawyers, and dragging everything into the public record. It would also likely destroy any chance of family reconciliation. Hannah and I spent hours discussing our options. Part of us wanted Nicole to face consequences for her actions. Another part just wanted to disappear quietly and start over. We decided to give Jake one last chance to handle things within the family before taking legal action. I met Jake at the same diner, this time with printouts of the security footage. His face crumpled as he watched his wife sneaking around our property in the pre-dawn darkness. He admitted their marriage was over, but worried about custody battles and the impact on the children. Nicole had threatened to claim abuse if he tried to leave. We gave Jake a week to figure things out before we proceeded with charges. It felt like an ultimatum, but Nicole's behavior was escalating, and we couldn't wait indefinitely for Jake to find his backbone. Our baby deserved to be born into a safe environment, not one where its mother lived in constant fear. During that week, things went surprisingly quiet. No packages, no messages, no social media posts. The silence was almost more unnerving than the harassment. Hannah struggled to focus on work, jumping every time her phone buzzed. I found myself constantly checking security cameras, waiting for the next incident. Then Hannah's colleague, Min, called with strange news. She'd overheard someone at a prenatal yoga class describing plans to expose a fake pregnancy for attention. The woman matched Nicole's description and had been asking other attendees if they knew anyone who'd faked pregnancy for sympathy. Min had shut down the conversation conversation, but others seemed intrigued by the story. The realization that Nicole was now trying to convince strangers that Hannah's pregnancy was fake marked a new low. We'd shown ultrasounds to family, had medical documentation, but Nicole was creating an alternate reality where we were the perpetrators of an elaborate hoax. Her delusion was complete. As the week deadline approached, Jake called. He'd filed for separation and moved back to our parents' house with the children. Nicole had reacted badly, threatening everyone involved, but he'd recorded her threats. He supported us filing charges and would testify about her behavior if needed. With Jake's support, we met with a lawyer to discuss our options. She reviewed our evidence and said we had a strong case for a restraining order and harassment charges. The process would be stressful, but would create legal consequences if Nicole continued her behavior. We decided to move forward. The lawyer prepared our filing while we focused on Hannah's health. Her 16-week appointment showed continued healthy development, but her blood pressure remained concerning. The doctor recommended modified bed rest and minimal stress, an impossible prescription given our circumstances. We hadn't told Nicole about the impending legal action, hoping to serve papers without warning, but somehow, she found out. Maybe Jake had let something slip, or perhaps she'd been monitoring our activities more closely than we realized. Either way, she knew what was coming. The night before we were scheduled to file, our phones rang simultaneously. Different family members were calling in panic. Nicole had sent a group message to extended family claiming we were trying to destroy her family with false accusations because we were jealous of her children. She included photos of her kids crying, saying they missed their uncle and aunt, who now hated them. The manipulation was masterful in its cruelty. Using her children as weapons, making them complicit in her campaign, was beyond anything we'd expected. Family members who'd been supportive began questioning whether legal action was necessary. Some suggested we were taking things too far. Hannah broke down completely. The stress, the judgment, the constant attacks had finally overwhelmed her. I found her on the bathroom floor, sobbing and clutching her stomach, terrified that the stress would harm our baby. I called her doctor, who recommended immediate evaluation at the hospital. During the drive, Hannah was quiet, except for repeated apologies to our unborn child. I held her hand, promising everything would be okay, while privately terrified that Nicole had finally succeeded in causing real harm. The hospital lights felt harsh as we checked in, explaining our situation to sympathetic nurses. Tests showed Hannah's blood pressure had spiked dangerously. They admitted her for monitoring and started medications to bring it down safely. The baby's heartbeat remained strong, but the doctor warned that continued stress could lead to serious complications, including preterm labor. I spent the night in an uncomfortable chair beside Hannah's bed, watching monitors and jumping at every alarm. She slept fitfully, occasionally murmuring apologies or promises to our baby. By morning, her levels had stabilized, but the doctor insisted on keeping her another day for observation. While Hannah rested, I stepped into the hallway to call our lawyer. I explained the escalation and hospitalization. She assured me this would only strengthen our case and offered to expedite the filing. By afternoon, Nicole would be served with a restraining order and notice of criminal charges. Jake arrived at the hospital with flowers and tears. He apologized profusely for not seeing Nicole's true nature sooner, for enabling her behavior through inaction. He promised to support us completely, both legally and personally. His presence comforted Hannah, showing that family bonds could survive Nicole's poison. My parents came next, my mother finally understanding that this wasn't about family disagreements, but genuine danger. She held Hannah's hand, promising to stand by us regardless of family fallout. My father spoke quietly about helping us relocate, having already researched moving companies and housing options in several cities. That evening, as Hannah dozed, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I checked it. The message was simple. Heard you're in the hospital. Karma works fast. This is what happens when you live in delusion. I showed the message to the nurse who called security. They increased monitoring of Hannah's room and restricted visitor access. The precaution felt extreme but necessary. We couldn't predict how Nicole would react to being served legal papers, but her escalating behavior suggested it wouldn't be peaceful. As visiting hours ended, I kissed Hannah goodbye and promised to return first thing in the morning. She squeezed my hand, whispering that she felt safer in the hospital than at home. The admission broke my heart. We'd gone from trying to build a family to hiding in a hospital room, afraid of what my brother's wife might do next. I drove home through empty streets, exhausted but too wired to sleep. Our house felt different now, not like a home, but a fortress under siege. I checked every lock, every camera, every window before finally collapsing on the couch. Tomorrow, Nicole would be served. Tomorrow, this would either end or escalate beyond anything we'd experienced. But tonight, Hannah and our baby were safe in a monitored hospital room. Tonight, we had family support and legal protection in progress. Tonight, despite everything Nicole had thrown at us, we were still standing, still fighting, still protecting the family we'd worked so hard to create. The evidence folder sat on our coffee table, thick with documentation of Nicole's campaign. Each page represented a moment of pain, fear, or anger, but it also represented our refusal to be victims, our determination to protect ourselves and our child. Nicole had wanted to break us. Instead, she'd only made us stronger. The morning Nicole was served, I sat in the hospital cafeteria nursing lukewarm coffee while Hannah slept upstairs. My phone vibrated with a text from our process server confirming delivery at 9:47 a.m. Within minutes, Jake called. I could hear shouting in the background before the line went dead. Hannah was awake when I returned to her room, color finally returning to her cheeks. The doctor had cleared her for discharge that afternoon with strict instructions about stress management. I helped her change out of the hospital gown, noticing how her hands still trembled slightly. During the drive home, we passed Nicole's car parked outside a law office downtown. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, but I kept driving. Hannah noticed too, placing her hand over mine. We'd chosen our path. Now we had to see it through. At home, 17 missed calls lit up my phone screen. Most were from Nicole's number, but several came from unfamiliar local numbers. I deleted the voicemails without listening. Our lawyer had advised no contact whatsoever now that legal proceedings had begun. Hannah settled onto the couch while I made her lunch. Through the kitchen window, I noticed an unfamiliar car creeping slowly past our house. It circled the block twice before disappearing. I photographed the license plate, adding it to our ever-growing documentation file. That afternoon, my cousin texted warning that Nicole had shown up at her workplace, demanding to know if she'd been feeding us information. Security had escorted Nicole out when she'd refused to leave. My cousin's boss was understanding but concerned about further disruptions. Jake arrived around dinner time with the children. They looked confused and tired, the youngest clinging to a stuffed animal. While Hannah played with them in the living room, Jake and I talked in the kitchen. Nicole had barricaded herself in their house after being served, threatening to hurt herself if anyone tried to enter. Police had performed a welfare check and found her unharmed but highly agitated. She'd been given the option of voluntary psychiatric evaluation or potential involuntary commitment. She'd chosen the former, likely on her lawyer's advice. Jake had retrieved the children during her absence. The next few days passed in a blur of legal meetings and medical appointments. Hannah's blood pressure gradually improved, though she startled easily at unexpected sounds. I worked from home exclusively now, my laptop a permanent fixture on the dining room table where I could monitor both doors. Our lawyer explained the restraining order terms. Nicole couldn't come within 500 feet of us, our home, or Hannah's workplace. Any violation would result in immediate arrest. The criminal harassment charges would proceed separately, with a hearing scheduled in 6 weeks. Hannah's employer had been incredibly supportive once they understood the situation. They'd implemented additional security measures and approved her permanent remote work arrangement. Her colleagues sent flowers and cards, expressing shock that she'd endured such treatment. One morning, I found Jake sitting on our front steps when I went to get the mail. He'd been up all night with his youngest, who kept asking for mommy. The older children understood something was wrong, but not the details. He was struggling to maintain normalcy while navigating separation paperwork. Nicole's family had begun reaching out, initially aggressive and accusatory. Her sister called me spineless for attacking a mother of 3. Her mother left a voicemail threatening to expose our lies to everyone. I forwarded everything to our lawyer, who sent cease and desist letters. The extended family divide deepened. Some relatives who'd initially supported Nicole grew quiet after seeing the evidence. Others doubled down, insisting we'd overreacted to normal family friction. Thanksgiving was approaching, and my mother tearfully canceled the family gathering. Hannah's 20-week ultrasound revealed we were having a daughter. We cried together in the examination room, overwhelmed by joy tinged with sadness that we couldn't share this moment freely. The technician, noticing our emotion, printed extra photos for us to keep. That evening, we found a package on our doorstep. My hands shook as I called the police, but it turned out to be a gift from Mrs. Chen, hand-knitted baby booties with a note of support. The kindness of near strangers contrasted sharply with family cruelty. Jake's custody arrangement solidified. He had the children weekdays while Nicole got supervised weekend visits. She'd completed her psychiatric evaluation, which recommended ongoing therapy. Whether she'd comply remained to be seen, but it was a requirement for maintaining any custody. I accompanied Hannah to her prenatal classes, hypervigilant in every public space. Other expectant parents chatted easily about nursery plans and name choices, while we sat quietly, unable to fully embrace the experience. Hannah squeezed my hand during breathing exercises, both of us pretending everything was normal. 2 weeks before the hearing, Nicole's lawyer contacted ours. She wanted to negotiate a plea deal, reduce charges in exchange for a guilty plea and agreement to stay away. Our lawyer recommended accepting, explaining trials were unpredictable and this guaranteed protection. Hannah struggled with the decision. Part of her wanted Nicole to face full consequences, but the larger part just wanted peace. We spent hours discussing it, ultimately deciding to accept if Nicole also agreed to mandatory therapy and no unsupervised contact with our daughter once she was born. The negotiations took days. Nicole initially refused any terms limiting her access to future family events. Jake's testimony about her behavior toward the children apparently changed her mind. She finally agreed to our terms rather than risk losing her own children. On the day of the hearing, Hannah stayed home on bed rest while I attended with our lawyer. Nicole looked smaller somehow, her usual smugness replaced by something harder to read. She pled guilty to harassment charges and accepted the terms. The judge issued a 5-year restraining order. Afterward, Jake waited by my car. He thanked me for accepting the plea deal, knowing we could have pushed for harsher consequences. His children needed their mother, even a flawed one. I understood his position, even if I didn't fully agree. The drive home felt surreal. 3 months of escalating terror had ended with a simple court proceeding. No dramatic confrontation, no satisfying moment of victory, just paperwork and legal terms. Hannah was napping when I arrived, so I sat in our daughter's nursery, finally allowing myself to imagine a future. That weekend, we hosted a small gathering, just my parents, Jake and the children, and a few close friends who'd supported us throughout. Hannah laughed for the first time in months as her nephew showed her his dinosaur collection. The afternoon felt almost normal. As guests prepared to leave, Jake pulled me aside. Nicole had started therapy and seemed committed to it. She'd written letters of apology, but understood we weren't ready to receive them. Maybe someday, he said hopefully. I nodded, but made no promises. The following weeks brought a strange adjustment period. Without constant threat, we struggled to relax. Hannah jumped at doorbell rings. I checked security cameras obsessively. Our therapist assured us this hypervigilance would fade with time and continued safety. We decided against moving, not wanting Nicole to drive us from our home. Instead, we focused on preparing for our daughter. The nursery came together slowly, each decoration a small act of defiance against the fear Nicole had tried to instill. Hannah returned to working part-time from home as her pregnancy progressed. Her colleagues celebrated with a virtual baby shower, their kindness helping heal some of the isolation Nicole had forced upon us. We even reactivated limited social media, though with strict privacy settings. My parents became our primary support system, visiting weekly with groceries and encouragement. My father helped install a new fence while my mother organized baby clothes. Their presence reminded us that family could be a source of strength, not just pain. Jake brought the children over regularly. The older two asked occasionally about their mother, and we carefully explained she was getting help to feel better. They seemed to accept this, more interested in feeling the baby kick than dwelling on adult problems. One afternoon, sorting through baby gifts, I found the journal where we documented Nicole's harassment. Hannah suggested we keep it, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of our resilience. We'd protected our family against someone who'd tried to destroy it. As Hannah entered her 3rd trimester, the restraining order felt less like a shield and more like background noise. We'd established new routines, new boundaries, new definitions of family. The fear hadn't completely disappeared, but it no longer controlled our days. The week before our daughter's birth, Jake mentioned Nicole had completed her first therapy program. She'd asked him to tell us she was working on understanding why she'd acted as she had. He didn't ask for forgiveness on her behalf, just wanted us to know. Our daughter arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning after 12 hours of labor. Hannah was magnificent, focused and strong despite everything we'd endured. When the nurse placed our baby on Hannah's chest, we both sobbed, tears of joy, relief, and release from months of fear. We named her Sarah, meaning princess, because she'd already survived a battle before taking her first breath. Jake visited that afternoon with his children, who marveled at their tiny cousin. He took photos to show Nicole during their supervised visit, a small kindness we could allow. The first weeks home were exhausting but peaceful. Hannah flourished in motherhood, her confidence growing with each day. I watched her sing to Sarah during late-night feedings, amazed by her strength after everything she'd endured. 3 months after Sarah's birth, we received a letter through Jake. Nicole had written it as part of her therapy, taking full responsibility for her actions. She didn't ask for forgiveness or renewed contact, just wanted us to know she understood the pain she'd caused. Hannah read it once, then filed it away. We weren't ready to consider reconciliation, might never be, but acknowledging Nicole's effort felt like progress. Our daughter deserved a future unburdened by generational grudges, even if that meant maintaining careful boundaries. Our first holiday season as a family of 3 was quietly special. We declined large gatherings, hosting only those who'd supported us. Sarah slept through dinner, blissfully unaware of the complex dynamics surrounding her arrival. That innocence was worth every battle we'd fought. As winter turned to spring, life settled into new rhythms. Hannah returned to work part-time, finding balance between career and motherhood. I'd grown closer to Jake through shared adversity, our brotherhood stronger for having weathered this storm. The restraining order remained in effect, but it felt less necessary now. Nicole maintained her distance, focusing on therapy and rebuilding her relationship with her own children. Jake reported she joined a support group for people working through toxic behaviors. We'd survived not through dramatic confrontation or revenge, but through patience, legal channels, and family support. Our daughter would grow up knowing she was desperately wanted, fought for, protected. That knowledge would be her inheritance, not the pain that preceded her arrival, but the love that conquered it.